Hey guys, what's going on? Paul here, back with Paddy, and great to be joined again by Army of Spies for Cardano Crack. Guys, great to have you back for another week.
Hiya, Paul. Hi, Army of Spies.
Sure.
Hey guys, glad to be back here.
Yeah, we'll get you on regularly. There's too much going on.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation the last day, and lots of different topics going on around Cardano today. So anyone new, we have a few topics that we're going to cover here. I suppose mainly looking at the hard fork combinator event that happened yesterday. We'll take a look around SEC and Kraken and the impacts or maybe non-impacts on Cardano. And what else we got? We have the SEC and Binance as well, and stablecoins. And there's one of contingent staking, another hot topic right now. So we'll go through all of them, and anyone with questions, do leave them in the comments down below, and we'll pull them in as often as we can as well. Or if there's any topics you want to push us through, this is fairly relaxed stream. We'll go where the conversation goes, and nothing taken too serious. Please do share it out as well. Help others find it. Give it a like. It does help with the algorithm and get more people in. The more people in, the better conversation we can have. So I think I see people starting to come in anyway.
Yeah, let's get going. Oh, there's some good topics. A lot of controversy this week.
Definitely is. And there's a strange color on the charts today as well. Or yesterday and today, they've strange color that I haven't seen for a while.
Feels good.
I'm not complaining now or anything, but
no.
Nice to see it.
Certainly not.
For sure. Everyone listening, actually, let us know on the audio on that of what's going on, and we will kick into it, I suppose. First topic, let's see what we got here. So yesterday we had another Cardano hard fork event. A lot less talk about this one compared to previous hard forks. There was a lot more, I suppose, public stuff in other hard forks, but the one that came yesterday, there was important aspects to it. Like all previous ones, when it came down to it, it's a sort of a non-event. The chain, you have the hard fork, and it's just like any other epoch, turns over and the chain keeps going and blocks keep getting produced. What's your thoughts on yesterday and everything that went on there?
So we're getting used to it being drama-free, aren't we? You know, compared to what we've had in the past in crypto, you know, hard forks used to be a massive deal. Well, they are in some places. Here it's just like, oh, it happened, it's done. And I love the name, you know, it was quite romantic. A wee bit of Valentine in there. It was quite smart to throw that in, and it kept me on track. I was like, oh, Valentine's Day is coming up. Like I got the hard fork and I got to get stuff. And so it was a win-win for me.
Yeah, I mean, this is really one of the underrated strengths, I think, of the Cardano ecosystem. We can have hard forked and it just kind of happens. All the stake pool operators and everybody else knows what they need to do. It happens. The average user in the ecosystem barely sees that anything happens. Maybe some new functionality rolls out after the hard fork at some point, but it's not this big contentious thing that produces crazy drama in the community. Maybe some of that changes with Voltaire. Maybe there'll be a little bit more of that debating what should happen in hard forks, but the hard fork itself, which is usually a super contentious event in a lot of blockchain ecosystems, isn't that way in Cardano. It just happens and everything's smooth.
Oh yeah, and you know, the bit that I like is that we tackled the issue, the fix that went in from the random bug that we had that brought things down a while ago. Brought things down, knocked a few nodes off. And it's fixed, it's done, it's out there. You know, there's not a 6 months, 12-month wait for madness to occur in all sorts of different chains. And it's there, it's done, it's ready. And I love that. You know, it feels like, to me, coming from a software background, it feels like the reactionary speed that should happen within a blockchain. Some of them, as you guys know, and everybody who's listening, can take quite some time for changes to occur. So yeah, for me, it's just great. You know, I'm getting so used to them. And I used to sit, because obviously being a stake pool operator, I used to sit and watch them, and then nothing would happen. Oh, everything's still working. Oh, great, that's that done. You know, and I can go back to watching Netflix.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to see. And like, we nearly should use a different name for it, because traditionally when we've had a hard fork in other blockchains, then a lot of times you can have there's a split in the chain, and then you end up with two coins. We have, like, Bitcoin has had a few of them over time where people fork off and they create their own version. But within Cardano, hard fork doesn't mean that. I've seen some people talking about it this week, that if certain things come into the chain with KYC and that they might fork the chain then. So that might be a real hard fork at that time. But within Cardano terms, hard fork really isn't a big deal compared to people who come in from other chains and they hear about we're having this. There's always a bit of panic over what's going to happen with my coins, or do I have to hold them somewhere? But you don't have to do anything with it. It's just like it's an upgrade, really. That's all it actually is. And this one brought in more cross-chain functionality. So for people that want to build dApps cross-chain, then it's going to be a lot easier now going forward. Any comments on it, or will we get into kind of staking? And it's strange to just move on so quick from a hard fork event, but that's what it is. It works.
There's nothing real else to say about it in that that's it. It's done. And, and maybe it's not one of the bigger ones that we've had over the past couple of years. Yeah, granted, we get that. There's not going to be these massive, changes all the time. But sometimes I would prefer small little changes all the time. That would be my perfect scenario for Cardano. And that's what I want. And this is one of them. And then I want to see more like that. So, yeah, keep them rolling. I ain't got much else to add on it, so we'll just move on and go and wait until the next one gets announced and the next set of upgrades.
I always go back and forth. I always wonder, should we have called it not a hard fork combinator event, but maybe like an upgrade combinator event, or something that just totally gets rid of that hard fork nomenclature? But then at the same time, it's kind of funny when Cardano has these hard forks and everybody's like, oh, Cardano's having a hard fork, outside of our community. And they're like waiting for the drama, and then nothing happens. We just smoothly glide through the hard fork. That's kind of entertaining from our perspective, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I like that one in the chat there from Mark. It's a functional upgrade. I take that one. I'll take that branding. Somebody send that to Charles in IOG. That's a less dramatic sort of line to use.
Yeah, then it doesn't really get the talk then. Well, I suppose Cardano doesn't get the media coverage anyway on good things, but maybe a spork. Keep the names coming in. Let us know.
I remember Spork from Toy Story. Sporky.
There's one here about, I wonder what the fork does for CNET or wrapping BTC. I don't really know a huge amount. It's one of the projects on my list. I just haven't dived into it. I don't know if you know much about it. I know they're wrapping Bitcoin, but I'm not sure how they're doing it. They're not using the centralized exchange, are they? I know there was two different projects. One was going to use an exchange and one was looking at a different custodian.
Yeah, I'm not big on it. I haven't done enough research on it. It's one of those ones where I just want to see it out there more than, But the thing that confuses me about wrapped BTC is we have Indigo that has a form of BTC. It's not wrapped, obviously. There's no Bitcoin coming on chain. But when something like that does happen and we do see some form of Bitcoin being wrapped onto Cardano, I'm sure it must increase the TVL of the chain. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
I know next to nothing. This is, I think I know which logo is theirs. This is like the cherub baby with wings, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm generally so conservative about wrapped assets or anything that has some sort of, cross chain. I don't want to call it a swapping component, but whether it's a bridge or some kind of a custodian that's locking the assets on the other chain and then emitting the new assets on the new chain. It seems like we've seen so many failures. I'm sort of waiting for this era when we've got the super ultra reliable technology, when everybody can say, okay, this method of doing wrapped assets on a second chain has had zero problems, ultra secure. I keep waiting for that era when we move into that phase, but I'm not sure even if we'll know when that happens, because it seems like something seems secure and then year, 2 years, months later, all of a sudden it's hacked. And we're like, okay, that wasn't the one. We're not there quite yet.
Yeah, it's definitely brings in risk anytime you have bridged assets. And I know with sidechains, that's another rabbit hole I have to dive down fairly soon on how they transfer the assets across with the Cardano sidechains coming in and how exactly that works, because it's meant to be a lot more secure, but I haven't got to get down into it yet to figure out how all that works versus locking them up, where when you have a traditional bridge, you lock them up on one side and then you mint them on the other side. But I'm not sure how it works with sidechains yet. I don't know if either of you have looked into it yet.
No, it's not something I would be versed on, Paul, unfortunately.
All right, let's see. I think they're soon launching Wrapped BTC. I think I seen something about, I don't know, was it a testnet going live today or yesterday or something? But again, it's something I need to look into. Spork, one of the best utensils, needs to get more usage. Really going to run with that name now, I think. I'll use a bridge and then swap to a native asset. Yeah, that's an option. An option too, to take away your risk of the bridge. Just for people who don't know, the reason that there's issues with bridges is because of the asset being locked on one side and then created on the other. If something happens to the assets, it's generally the smart contracts that have the assets locked up. If something happens on that side and the assets that are locked, they get stolen or hacked or whatever happens, then there's nothing to back up the asset that you have on the other chain. So essentially, the price of the asset is worth nothing because what was originally backing it up on the other chain is gone. Deep dive into bridge sidechain tech will be great. That's definitely something I need to do. Right, let's move on to another very big topic. The end of last week, I think Thursday last week, just after we had our live stream last Wednesday. So thoughts on the SEC charging, closing Kraken staking, and is there an impact on Cardano staking, either positive or negative? Who wants to kick off?
I'll let you go first, Army of Spies.
Okay, this is really interesting to me because we sort of knew, the first thing we knew is that there was a settlement, right? Which means we're not going to get any law out of this. In a settlement, the company just says, and Jesse Powell even said as much in his response after this all broke, that it wasn't worth the trouble. We didn't want to lose so much focus trying to fight this. We're just paying the fine. What was it, 30 million, I think? So we get this settlement. And then at some point after the news that the settlement broke, we get the actual complaint that the SEC filed, which was really interesting because people, of course, took an optimistic viewpoint on this. They said, this must be because of all the extra stuff Kraken was doing, all the stuff that was laid out in the facts section of the complaint. But I think people are sort of they're missing one thing about like the way legal writing happens in the US. Everybody who goes to law school in the US is taught this thing called IRAC, which is a way to write a legal document. IRAC stands for issue, rule, application, and conclusion, where you sort of lay out the facts of what actually happened. You lay out the rule or the law, and then you apply the law to the facts and then come to a conclusion. So people read the first part of that complaint, which is actually labeled facts. A certain section of the start is labeled facts, and they went through all the facts. That's usually the section where you just say all the bad stuff about the person you're litigating against, even if it's irrelevant to the actual law, right? If you're suing some guy for something he did, and you could possibly throw in there that he was with his mistress that day, you're going to try to throw that in there, right? Completely irrelevant, but you want to make him look as bad as possible when you're suing him. So anything you could throw in there, you're going to throw in. And the SEC certainly did this with Kraken. They threw in all the bad facts, like Kraken, obviously not advertising that they're not staking all of the assets that are part of their staking program. They're not advertising, even obvious things, that they're paying this staking yield on Bitcoin, despite the fact that Bitcoin has no staking. So they throw in all these bad facts, things to make Kraken look bad. But then when you come to the actual rule part, they basically say, hey, Howey test. And then when you come to the application part, they just go through the Howey test. And when you read that part, which is them actually applying, the SEC applying their interpretation of the law to the facts of the Kraken staking program, they don't talk about all those bad facts they threw in there to make Kraken look bad. What they say is, hey, there was an investment of money. You sent your money to Kraken. And then they just go through the other factors, which are pretty, under the sort of common enterprise part. This is the part that the crypto people always want to fight, especially with staking. They always want to fight it in terms of vertical and horizontal commonality. But the beautiful thing for Cardano is that we don't have that first part. All the action in the EVM world with staking is in this common enterprise section and on the efforts of others section. But in Cardano, we don't send our assets anywhere to stake. They stay in our wallet. That's the investment of money part. It seems like Cardano has this huge advantage from Go that the rest of the staking world just doesn't have.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I totally agree. And I've been actually surprised. The bit that surprised me the most that Kraken, they settled, and maybe they were advised by lawyers or whatever it was, or I mean, we see what's going on with XRP. It's never ending. They're lawyering up more than anything, but Kraken have just decided, yeah, maybe we've lost this one. Fine, we'll pay the fine and get away from it. And when it comes down to Cardano and the impacts on Cardano, I don't see how it can impact. It's exactly what you say. Nobody takes my ADA. Nobody takes it, holds it, uses it. I keep it. They were probably making multiple earnings from it with staking and also probably using it on their platform for people going long and short and all that. But that part of it's fine. It's it's they are taking it and staking it and then providing the return. So it is technically like an investment. And I biasly, I've always been against staking platforms because I've always thought, they're taking it away from the likes of the stake pool operators. Biased view, obviously, but it's it's better for, say, the term decentralization. Will it impact Cardano? I think it is. Look at all the discussions that are happening this past week, the videos that Charles have been putting out, and the comments that have been going on within Twitter. It has kicked up a massive storm that's coming, and I sort of feel like the SEC might have staking in its crosshairs, because it's very easy for it to say it is a security investment. It's very hard to differentiate. The difference with Cardano is nobody's doing it for me. I'm doing it. The application layer works it all out itself. There's no middleman. There's no company to take it for the SEC to look at. So for me, it will have impacts. Cardano will make changes likely to safeguard in the future. Kraken, they're done with staking. Will it happen to others? I think so. I know Coinbase and Binance, but I don't think Binance US allows staking on that side. I've never went into that site to check, but obviously Binance.com does multiple options of staking. So they'll probably get around it by that sort of setup. They're pretty good at getting around the legalities of most sort of locations. Coinbase, that one's probably, I think, it could be in trouble with it being listed over there, and it is traded. So they need to be careful. Now, I don't know the inner workings of their legalities and how they've set up their staking, but it could also be the same. So let's see. But I'm hopeful that it doesn't have an impact on Cardano. In terms of the SEC can't come with Cardano and say you're providing staking, and you're not an entity that they can go after unless they come after us all.
Yeah, I suppose for me, when I look at it, what they have charged Kraken with right now, they're not considering how Cardano staking works. Like, they're not looking at self-custody staking. It's all about the third party that takes your funds, pools your funds together, and offers you a return. Because when you do native staking, which a lot of us do, or most of us do with Cardano, the ADA stays in your wallet. You delegate to a stake pool, but you're not actually sending that ADA to the SPO. The SPO or anyone else never has custody or control of your funds. Essentially, you staking, I use the simple way of like, you're essentially voting for that SPO. And for doing that and voting on a good actor in the system, it's the blockchain that actually pays you back rewards for that when the SPO mints blocks. So it's not the SPO being paid then, and then they pay you a part of the rewards. So it's all done by the chain and self-custody, where these third-party platforms like Kraken, you send your funds in, they pool it, they do whatever way they want to do it. They're the ones that are paid the staking rewards, and then they pay you part of that. So you're earning your reward from them, from the work that they do, because they do the work with your ADA or with whatever asset it is. Like, I think they probably settled, like Army of Spies said there, because they didn't want to get into this big battle. I think it's completely the wrong approach from the SEC. And Hester Pierce came out with a good article as well, talking about how the issue here, the SEC now are coming out saying that all they had to do was register as a security, and then that's fine. We could have worked it out. But the question she was asking was like, if they did want to register, is the process in place for someone to register a staking platform? And then if it is, do they register the staking platform as one, or do they have to register each individual asset that they offer on the staking platform? Because you look at it, it's vastly different. With ADA, your funds are never at risk because there's no slashing and there's no lockups and stuff. Whereas with Ethereum, where you have a massive lockup, you still haven't been able to unstake them, where you have the likes of DOT, where you do have a lockup. I can't remember, is it 28 or 30 days? Nothing wrong with that, but that's just the way they're done. So even there's a lot of differences. And I think what the SEC and everyone else is looking at right now, if you go through, Charles went through the Kraken paper, or the SEC paper to Kraken, and a lot of it is talking about the custody and who takes custody. Coinbase came out with an article as well on their staking, saying that we're not a security because of, and they have a big long article, and they say that anyone can do staking because it helps support the network and stuff like that. But they say most people won't do it because of having to run the servers and keep the software updated. So even they aren't taking into consideration that there's other staking models outside of what the likes of Ethereum run right now. So I think we're only at the start of it, but Cardano will hopefully start to get a lot more credit for the staking model that they have went with. They get a lot of shit for lots of different things, but I think the staking model is definitely something that, looking at what's going on now, they have nailed a really good approach to that. Who knows in the future if we need to change that, and we'll get into other aspects that have come up in the last week, but that's where I think on it.
The only thing I would add, and this was the bit that got me on the SEC website, and I'll just read for a couple of seconds. Today's action should make clear to the marketplace that staking as a service providers must register and provide full, fair, and truthful disclosure and investor protection. So that's a worrying statement for anyone else who's doing it, is the way I see it. They're going for them. You know, they're marked. And with that statement, they're likely going to be others, but who knows?
I guess we should disclaim for U.S. legal purposes, like North American legal purposes, that nobody on this podcast is trying to provide legal advice, and then nobody on the podcast is an attorney of anybody listening to the podcast, for sure.
Yeah. We have to do two now: non-financial and non-legal advice.
That's right, not financial advice, tax advice, or legal advice. But I think that really hits the nail on the head. It's like everybody who's doing some type of custodial staking, which is basically the rest of crypto, they're trying to paint this as, oh no, it's the bad things. It's all the bad facts, the bad details around the Kraken staking. But when you read all the SEC stuff, what they seem to be focused on is custodial staking, whether or not whatever staking service it is has custody of the assets, and whether the assets are at risk. And with slashing, those assets are definitely at risk. It's undeniable. It's purpose built into the system that your assets are at risk. That's their whole premise for staking. And, you know, I mean, there's nomenclature issues with whether or not, you know, EDM staking is custodial. You know, they say, oh, you have your keys. But my contention is, if somebody can delete your assets, you certainly do not have full custody. And I mean, Cardano, like you guys have been describing, Cardano is so beautifully built. We avoid all these problems.
Yeah, and it's like, even if you do want to do the staking for Ethereum yourself, and this isn't, I don't like things that are always we're better because of this or because of that, but in the Ethereum model, if you don't have 32 ETH, you can't actually stake yourself anyway. You have to send your funds, because to run a validator, you need to have 32 ETH, and then you also need to have the technical knowledge to run it. Like we've seen, I forget what they were now, there was some of the really big custodians that lost their keys for the Ethereum that they had staked. It was sometime last year, and I can't think of the name of it now. It doesn't really matter, but that's always the risk when you're running the validator or giving your funds up to someone else that's running the validator as well. So they're all things to take into consideration. Mark is coming up with new terms here again. D-staking as opposed to C-staking. So C as in custodial or central staking. So we could have D for decentralized staking.
Yeah.
56 says, but Coinbase offers 2%. So I think that is just protocol staking. It probably is. And that's what Coinbase talk about in their article, that they only do native staking. So, but it's still the case of you give them custody of your funds, And then I don't know how exactly they do it. I must check we never got full confirmation on the group that is Coinbase stake pools, but I think it's Avengers or something like that on Cardano, the group. I didn't look into that to see how many individual wallets stake there, or is it all one or two big wallets in each pool? Because if it is one or two wallets, then that kind of proves that they're not staking each individual account, each individual user, that they're pooling the funds together and staking that from one address rather than doing it individually for the user. So essentially they're pooling your funds, they're getting paid, and then they're paying you a cut of it. So the SEC, I think, does have an angle there. They're definitely not the worst offenders. You look at Binance, who from time to time offer 7, 8, I've seen 10, 15% APY. Now they run it you get it for 10, 15 days if you lock it in. And it's just to encourage people to drop ADA onto the platform. And I get questions fairly regularly of, why should I stake with a Cardano SPO when I can go to Binance and get 10 or 15%? But to me, the only way Binance can be doing it is Binance have a lot of ADA on the platform, and not every user that holds ADA there is going to stake it. So Binance can stake it all. They're earning a lot of ADA every single epoch for all of the ADA sitting on the platform. So they can pay higher rewards to people who do opt into the different staking product or different staking options they have. But that's not pure native staking. And I think platforms that offer that type of service are definitely going to be a target of the SEC, or definitely that's the type of thing I think they're targeting, where it's not clear on how the rewards are being generated and what's being added on top of actual staking. So let's see what else is here. Yeah, hard to enforce something when you don't understand it. And that's definitely part of it as well. I presume you mean on the SEC side that they don't fully understand all of this. I presume they're trying to go down that path. When you listen to Gary Gensler, I do get the perception he does know what he's talking about, but he doesn't like lots of aspects of it as well, like his stake and the video that came out about Kraken and that. For people in crypto, found it there's a lot of cringe in it, but I've been told for people outside of it, that reference kind of makes people understand it a bit more. But you do see he definitely understands a lot there, but other people who are making the rules, and they're trying to impose really old rules on emerging technology and emerging ways of how the world could work going forward. So there has to be people that come in from the crypto side that understand it and can talk about it and try and work out what the best way forward is, because there's some crazy rules around the world, like of what you can legally do based on a 100-year-old rule and stuff like that. So there's work to be done there too. What's your thoughts there?
Do you know, I'm going to say, and it's going to be different to what most people think, but I'm going to say the SEC will have some smart people employed to deal with these types of things. If they're going at a Kraken, XRP, anybody else that they've went after in the past, they get people in who knows this stuff. Gary might not know as much as we all think, but he's being told. The guy at the top usually is just the one who makes the decisions based on the information that he's given. And they were quick to act on this one, and it worked out for them. It's a win. So hopefully they don't get many more.
Yeah, they definitely recruit pretty high level attorneys to the SEC. They're very smart people. It's weird because they'll make intellectual shortcuts. Like even in the SEC Kraken complaint, you see them mention Cardano by name, not in a bad way, but they're just mentioning generally crypto staking ecosystems. And then at the same time, they'll say just generally staking involves slashing, when that obviously doesn't apply to the very short list of staking ecosystems they named. And I think they know that. I think they probably realize, someone at the SEC knows that there's no slashing in Cardano, but they'll still make that intellectual shortcut just because they know that nobody else knows. And I think they do that a lot. I think they actually know I don't want to say intellectual dishonesty, but I think they know that there's some lack of accuracy in a lot of the things they say about crypto. And they just do it anyways because they know the only people who are going to call them out are the people they're litigating against, us.
Yeah.
So don't leave your keys or your car in the car lot. Park at home. Take the keys in the house with you. Not your keys, not your car anymore. Not financial advice. You forgot the not legal advice there, Roki. But yeah, that sums it up. And even one of Gary's videos going around that someone took out the snippet was he was talking about not your keys, not your coin, or yeah, not your keys, not your coin. So if you don't hold custody, you're not the one that holds access, then there's a risk. And I think a lot of this is really kicking off with FTX and what happened on the scene when everyone's assets were on there, they were just gone. So they are trying to push it out. I don't agree with the methods they're doing. I think that's where you need some kind of compromise on it. It's a pity the Kraken couldn't fight this. I can see why they didn't want it coming in affecting other parts of the business. Coinbase have said they will fight it, and Paxos have said they're going to fight about the BUSD. We'll get to that in a few minutes. Anything else on this before? If they're staking, they should follow the protocol staking. That's the problem. Yeah, and then you see each protocol is different as well. So you can't bring in one rule for all of staking because it's there's so many different models out there. And yeah, if you can stake yourself, you should always stake yourself. And I don't tell people, if you're into crypto on day one, don't set up your own wallet day one. Use the centralized entity when you come in first. Get a handle of it. Make sure you understand how custody works yourself when you have your wallet, that you are in charge of your keys. Learn how to do it with smaller amounts first. When you're fully comfortable with it and you're sure you've secured, if it's a hardware wallet, you've secured your seed phrase, you haven't stored it digitally and stuff like that, understand all of that and then progress into staking yourself and holding custody for yourself. But some people say, get out of centralized exchanges day one. I would say wait a little while, understand how it all works, the risks, the rewards of doing it yourself, and then move out when you're comfortable with it. So anything else on Kraken or Cardano staking before we go on to the topic that was ripping Cardano Twitter apart the last few days?
No, nothing more on Kraken. Nothing more.
Okay, so thoughts on contingent staking on Cardano and the recent discussions in the Cardano community?
I think just to start, and the only bit that annoyed me about it all is the Twitter drama, and it feels like anything that comes up, and I'll probably get some flack for this after, there's like thousands of people in Cardano. They're like, I must give my opinion. I need to let everybody know what I think. And, I'm going to lay out where I am, and that's it. I'm not moving from that point. I'm not going to listen to anybody else. I'm going to stick to that. And it doesn't help anything. I think it just causes more drama. And then people from the outside are going, oh, Cardano's ripping itself apart because of this whole contingent staking and KYC and the need for DIDs and this and that. And I'm sitting watching it, and there's many times where I've seen so many comments and going, well, that's just wrong, and that's just downright cheeky, But it's been entertaining watching it. And I like the videos that came out from Charles on the topic. And for me, and one thing about contingent staking that I was sort of calling out for it a while ago, maybe a year or two ago, was there was pools out there, and this is the part of contingent staking where you could possibly reject someone that I was thinking about. There was pools that were being under attack, I'll call it. Say they had 50 odd million. There was one or two wheels floating about and putting them saturated. And I'm going to myself, if that was me, I'd be so angry because that's ruining the rewards for everybody else. It reduces the amount that everybody gets. There's an impact for that. And it's detrimental. And people were doing that purposely. Don't think anybody ever found out who was doing it, but it went on for quite a while. And it was going around Twitter constantly. This whale was moving purposely from pool to pool to saturate them for a period of time, causing people to leave. Then they would leave and go to another one and continuously do that. And it wasn't a nice thing. And that's where I think the idea of being able to possibly remove staking from your stake pool is good. It's a good idea. It gives you permission to do that. And once I say permission, everybody's going crazy. We should be permissionless, blah, blah, blah. But I just thought that was a good idea at the time. And I don't see why we couldn't have it anyways. That's the first part of it. Then we can go into the other part.
Actually, just before we go further into it, just what contingent staking is for people who haven't heard of it or might have heard bits and pieces of it. Basically, and correct me if I'm wrong on my explanation of it, Cardano is a push system right now. If you want to delegate to either of the two guys here, you go into your wallet and you delegate to, we'll say, to Paddy's stake pool, and he doesn't have a choice. You just get delegated into his pool, and that's fine. And that's the way I would never like to see Cardano going fully contingent staking or anything like that. I want to see it as open as possible, but that's how the system works right now. So if contingent staking came in, then you would still do your transaction that you want to stake to his pool. But on the other side, Paddy would get some kind of notification or whatever way it works that he has to sign that transaction as well. So it will be a multi-sig transaction, and he basically has to accept you into the pool. So he can look, and if there was identification brought in, or maybe it's based on some NFT you hold in your wallet, so he knows, yes, let this person in. But that's very high level what contingent staking is. And I'm open to correction there or better explanations.
I thought that was a great explanation of contingent staking, and I think people are kind of underselling the attack vector on stake pools that Paddy described. Sammy, Stick with has been talking about this quite a bit, and you could, I mean, especially as DeFi sort of proliferates in Cardano, we have more and more liquidity. I don't want to give anybody any ideas, but if you hated a stake pool, you could just borrow a bunch of delegation and delegate to a stake pool you don't like and push them over that saturation limit, wait for all their delegators to leave, and then pull that delegation, and they're gonna have to rebuild from nothing. I mean, we don't have the same sort of extent of things like flash loans in Cardano like they do in the EVM. That could be even worse if you could do this via some kind of flash loan, then delegate, then pull the delegation is, after the requisite number of delegators are pulled out of that stake pool. But it is still an attack that people could use, because I mean, you don't even have to be a whale. You could just borrow a bunch of stake to push somebody over the saturation limit, and it's gonna have adverse consequences for that stake pool. And I do think, obviously, if that were the only concern here, then everybody'd be like, okay, yeah, contingent staking doesn't sound so bad. What everybody's afraid of is the perception, at least the predictions by many, that this will create a slippery slope toward KYC. The idea is that the reason we have permissionlessness at the base layer, we try to have it in a lot of things, all things if we can, but especially in staking, is because people are afraid the regulators are going to come by and say, as soon as you can reject stake, that means you can require know your customer data on your delegators, and you can do AML stuff. And the AML requirements in the US, I mean, it's not like you just file a AML form and you're done. You actually have to investigate. Like, all of the big financial institutions, credit card companies have entire floors of people. All they do is monitor all the transactions that happen with those credit cards. And this is everything. Prepaid cards that you might buy in the grocery store have whole departments that do this. And they monitor everything, all the little transactions that go on. They monitor at one layer algorithmically. And then the algorithm flags transactions, and humans have to look at those transactions. And then they file suspicious activity reports with FinCEN, who then decides what they're going to report. So it's not, this whole KYC AML thing is not just, okay, you got the data from your customers. Like, a full KYC AML suite involves you hiring AML professionals who sit around and monitor transactions flagged by algorithms, so that they can then flag them to FinCEN and SARS, and then FinCEN can decide whether or not they want to investigate those. So it's a pretty serious burden. But then there's the timing thing. It's like, are we talking about stuff that we have to worry about in 5-10 years? Like, crypto regulation moves so fast, and it can move in such a detrimental direction so fast. Is there even a point in worrying about the possibility of this kind of KYC AML stuff if it's not going to happen for another 5 years?
Yeah, it's definitely not. Some people make it out to be black and white, that if you bring in these types of options, then it means KYC on the layer one and everything like that. But it's definitely not black and white. There's a lot of gray areas in it, and it could be a slippery slope to a lot more measures coming on chain than we want to see. I would never like to see the chain going to complete KYC where everyone who uses it has to be KYC'd. And I know there's people who will argue that it should even have that, but I think we have to wait and see. Again, it's not going to be Charles or IOG decides to bring in something this big into it. This will have to go to Voltaire. So Voltaire on the Cardano roadmap is where we bring in on-chain governance, where everyone within the community can vote on these types of things. And if we do bring that in, it wouldn't be that KYC is done on the base layer of the chain. It would be that the option would be there, I suppose, for different dApps that are operating on it or different stake pools. Again, there's differences on this. Is it just on stake pools? If we bring it in there, does it then leak into dApps or does it leak into something else then as well? So I would say we have to wait and see where it goes. And the time for people to come out screaming, fighting for their opinion is when this goes to an actual vote. Put together proper arguments on both sides to educate people who are going to be voting on this. Not kind of, there's fear-mongering across social media on that if this happens, it immediately escalates to the worst possible scenarios. And I think that's putting some people off even getting involved or researching the situation, as well as when you go straight from 0 to 100 of how bad things are going to get. It is a scale. And again, when regulations do come knocking on every blockchain, every ecosystem, they are going to come knocking. That's when we need to be able to help them on the education side as well, to talk about where regulation fits. And this isn't anything specific on Cardano. This is crypto in general. It's going to come in all different aspects of it. And it's up to people within the ecosystem to come out and talk about it, explain where it can fit, where it really doesn't have a place. And we don't want to go to the complete banking sector just comes and sits into blockchain. We want to use some of the advantages that we have, but we also have to be open that we are going to get some impacts from the previous banking ways and how that all works. And there has to be something in the middle is what's going to work. And if you want complete privacy and every transaction, no one can know what you're doing, then Cardano was never the chain for that, because we have a public ledger. So every transaction can be tracked. Yes, individual wallets aren't KYC'd, but there's always going to be an endpoint that you start there and you can track back. Things like Midnight being a privacy chain, not a privacy token, but being a privacy chain is something that could become more, there could be a lot more people looking towards something like that if these types of measures come into Cardano then as well.
And you know, I feel as if there wouldn't have been such a crazy reaction if the two topics had been kept separate. So now we see contingent staking and KYC being this amalgamated thing now, where it's argued in the same sentence. It's different, it is different, and I don't like that, but it is what it is. If contingent staking had been proposed, and I think it was by Charles, and there was people talking about something from 2001. If it had, the argument had been put out about the oversaturation attacks, most people would have understood that and went, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea. That's stopping me losing my rewards, so everybody wins." Especially there's a lot of people in a lot of huge pools that was happening to. I don't think a lot of people would have complained then. But on the KYC side, there's a big worry from myself on it, and about having to sign this transaction to allow someone to stake to the pool. And there was a comment there about someone saying it'll have a knock-on effect about the amount of time it'll take for you to get your rewards. It could be likely. I'd say most ISPOs would be on top of that. But for me, the big question, and once we ever do get to a point where we're discussing it with IOG, is what happens to everybody that's already staking? Does that all get unstaked and all need to be restaked? That's my biggest worry. How does that get managed? Because I know there's multiple people who stake with me who I talked to maybe 2 years ago, and they told me they'll be just leaving that there and they'll come back in 5-10 years. And they'll probably, there's no transactions on their wallets. They don't do anything. They just leave it there. It's a long-term investment. And they're probably never going to look at it for quite some time. They don't want to deal with anything like that. Then they're probably going to, well, why would I waste my time doing this? I just wanted to leave it there and not worry about it instead of having to maintain it per se. But the idea of this coming in, now I'm not against KYC. I just think we need a lot more discussion on it, is to say, what about what's there? How do we deal with that? How do we potentially unstake the entire network for it to be restaked so that it all adds up legally? It's a big worry for me, and I'm hoping that we get more discussions. Proper discussions is probably the best way for me to describe it, rather than Twitter shouting matches. on the topic and to, you know, educate and build information out there to say exactly why, and, you know, research into it rather than just shouting about it.
Yeah, obviously crypto has a few comments on it here as well. I'm not sure I understand the drama with contingent staking. Are we saying we can move forward without adhering to any or many country regulation or regulations? And yeah, that's something we have to take into consideration. And with Cardano being a public blockchain and wanting to go for mass adoption, there will probably have to be some compromises down the line on what is accepted. But that's where we need people in the industry to work with people outside of it to find out what the best fit is. Here's another one here. The future development mass adoption plan for those against contingent staking. I don't see a thriving Cardano future unless we find a way to meet some basic level of government regulation. And I'd be along them lines. I wouldn't like to see the full KYC of the chain of everything for every individual transaction. You can always KYC the endpoints, which most places do right now. Certain things, I think, like Paddy said, contingent staking doesn't have to mean KYC. Charles talked about this in 2021.
Yeah, I think
and people thought it was, it's a good idea back then. But as soon as KYC was mentioned along with it, that's when things really started to spiral.
That's when the bomb dropped.
Yeah. It seems like another case of fundamental misunderstandings on the side of devs and the community, maybe. Yeah, I think I don't understand the impacts of both sides of it either. And I need to get more education on it. I think lots of people are like that as well, that we have to look into it. And nobody probably knows right now what the long-term impacts of this. We might go into it now thinking that the impact is that there's only a small little change coming in and it's not going to be much, but it doesn't take much for that to start spiraling into something else. And that's where it's not just something we decide now that, yes, this is possible, and then that's it. It's something that will have to be monitored continually. If you're starting a business utilizing blockchain, you'd have people sign up anyway. I think maybe, I don't know if that's in relation to Charles talking about stake pools being businesses and people who stake with you are essentially going into business with you. He kept using that analogy. And Tui, jump in here and just going through the comments just to bring us up to date. If you're offering anything beyond validating blocks and distributing the rewards, you're running a conventional business. And yeah, I put out a video talking a bit about this today, and the case I used was an ISPO is one case where potentially you do need this because we don't know what the regulations are going to be around that going forward. To me, it's not that much different than an ICO because you're giving up your rewards and for that you're getting a token. I know there's more leeway to have an argument against this if there ever was something brought against it, but it's not that much different. So maybe people running an ISPO, they want to be able to have this where they do KYC and then they let the people who've KYC'd with them into the stake pool. We look at Axo Trade where they done their ISPO. The idea was they were going to take the ADA and then they would give you the token down the line. They've changed that where they sent back, I think sometime before Christmas, I can't remember exactly, they sent the ADA back to everyone who was due that was their staking rewards, and you can still claim the token if you KYC and you're not in restricted regions. So they're going back on that now, where if something like this was in place, this could have all been done a lot earlier. So there's cases for and against on both sides. And that's definitely the case for it doesn't tell me if it does not worry you because it gives an open door to the SEC enforcement to be mandatory for every SPOs and delegators. When the possibility is there, if the functionality is there, then the possibility of them coming in and trying to enforce it is always going to be there. And that's a big argument that people have on where we talk about the slippery slope. So it's definitely not a simple decision. It's not a simple yes or no, we should bring it in or we shouldn't bring it in. There's both sides to be argued on it.
Do you ever feel like, and I'm not in the US, so I don't experience it, but as people were talking to me about with JED, they couldn't access JED. So to me, that is a form of You know, that's locking as a locking mechanism to everybody from the States can't access it. You know, I had this idea, shouldn't it be the responsibility of the wallets maybe to, you know, circumvent certain jurisdictions performing things with on blockchain? Everybody knows you can use a VPN, but that's not advice to anybody who's trying to get jed. But it's always done at the front end. You know, it's not really the back end servers, which is what the stake pool operators are doing. And you know, they don't take any custody, they don't hold anybody's data, they don't, you know, it's to me it feels like I don't understand, you know, and maybe I'll have to research more as we get to learn more in the next couple of months why a stake pool operator should be responsible for that. Plus, then it comes to what you said, Paul. You know, you think of the scale. Now, I'm a pretty small pool, but there's like 2,800 delegates in the pool. You know, if people are moving in and out, people are coming, going, or all of them got unstaked, and I had to revalidate all those people, that's more than one job for one person. Then it does become a bigger business. Then you might need a floor of people. There's some pools have 10, 20,000 people in there, and people are coming, going all day, every day. And we're not experts on validating KYC information. I'll say there might be a debt of sorts, but does that really cover it? You know, these are the types of questions that we're going to need to go into if this coming. Not saying it's coming, and not saying it's coming in that level, but it does worry me. Yeah. The SEC, you know, oversight of people outside of the States, I don't worry about that. You know, I don't think they're going to come to Ireland and get me. But so, you know, but then, you know, Charles did say they have global sort of reach, whatever. But it's hard, it's very hard for them to do that. And I honestly don't think they'll come after, I'll call us small fish. You know, we're not like the Krakens, we're not like all that. It's beyond their scale of, you know, operational scale to start going after stake pools, you know, and more will come if the current ones get taken down. You know, it'll be a never ending battle.
Yeah, this is a good point about the sort of people have been making vows lately on Twitter about how they'll basically become outlaws if they have to fight KYC. People are saying they're going to move their stake pools outside of North America. But I mean, we have examples of this in the history of crypto, like Arthur Hayes, who was one of the founders of BitMEX, the Bitcoin Mercantile Exchange, which was basically just a futures exchange originally based out of Hong Kong, I think. And Arthur Hayes, I don't know if he was in the US at all during the running of BitMEX. I'm sure he came back to visit, but he was based out of Asia, lived in Asia, running an Asian futures exchange. And when the US regulators got mad at him, they just told him to report to the FBI field office in Honolulu. They were like, if you're an American, you like having a passport? Like, we don't care. We don't care where you are. We're just going to tell you to report to an FBI field office, whichever one is closest to where you are. We absolutely don't care where you are. Completely different case if you're an EU person or you're somewhere else based outside of the US. Obviously, there could be egregious cases if you're running some kind of a, you know, gigantic, you know, entity doing something really bad. US regulators certainly will reach outside the US and lean on their partner governments to, you know, do something, possibly even getting people extradited. But like you said, the SEC has a very limited human power. They have very limited personnel. So they're not going to, they like to make examples out of people. They like to set precedents in big cases. They go after the Krakens, and then everybody has to sort of determine how that would apply to them. But for the US people who are saying, I'm just going to move my stake pool to X country, that didn't work out very well for Arthur Hayes. And I think he has a much bigger sort of defense war chest than the average Cardano stake pool. So I don't know about American people becoming outlaws and running their stake pool in other countries. I don't know how well that'll work out for them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna fly down through some of the questions here just to make sure I catch up because I'm starting to fall behind in them. So talking here on sidechains and layer twos, and that's definitely a possibility for some of the processes or some of the dApps that want to really hone in on the regulation side and restrict certain areas. And I think that's an area that will grow over time as well, that there will be specific sidechains for different types of dApps or ones that aren't available in certain countries or different things like that. And that's where I would like to see a lot of this happening is on the layer twos and is on sidechains, that a lot of this type of stuff happens there. And for me, that would be that will be one of the more optimal outcomes of it. This one here, Mark, option stop delegation when you reach saturation. So something that just came to mind there was where we were talking about the whale attack, where people were moving in massive amounts of ADA into a stake pool to try and basically attack the stake pool. Potentially there's something we could do down the line, bring in a SIP that if a new delegation is going to push a pool over saturation, that delegation, the TX fails. There could be something that could be brought in there in terms of actual staking. The mechanism, it would have to be changed on the protocol level. But if the big case for bringing in contingent staking was along that side, maybe there's something that could be explored that you could stop new delegation coming in when you do get to a certain level. It's a question I get from delegators worrying about saturation as well. And you see, you have people who will stake or delegate, and they don't want to look at it for a few years, but they always have the worry of saturation. So maybe that's an area that could be looked at, but that's definitely outside of here.
What about the one thing I was thinking about when this was all going on? What if I technically stake my ADA to a smart contract, and the smart contract is then delegating that out to stake pools? How could that even be policed? How could someone then come along and try and do KYC on the smart contract or the people that's in it, and then does someone block the whole smart contract then? Because the way that I was thinking about it, I'm going to do more research this week because I didn't get time, is there's smart contracts out there that people are doing for liquidity pools and stuff and all other things that are going on. That ADA that's in there is staking to different stake pools. You see that happening. That's been going on. There was a few small pools that have been getting liquidity recently from, was it Liquid? So that whole smart contract is an amalgamation of hundreds of people, putting that in, and they're still going to be waiting on their ADA rewards. So you then block the entire smart contract, or you got to do then the KYC for everybody who's part of that smart contract. And these are just some of the things that I was rumbling around my head when this is going on that we'll need to discuss, because it's a minefield then, because then, okay, there's one person out of 1,000 who I need to KYC, and they don't pass KYC, so the whole smart contract can't stake to my stake pool. It's going to be crazy, and things like that will need to be fleshed out.
Yeah, you do have protocols for, we say, the likes of Liquid. People who've got involved with Liquid, they put their ADA in. That ADA is delegated to different stake pools out there, but it's Liquid is delegating it. So I hadn't thought of that aspect, but yeah, there's a lot of things to consider in it. So it says here about Bitcoin and mining pools, and if they allowed contingent staking. And I've seen some people refer to this as well, but that will be more on processing actual transactions rather than just staking, because with Cardano it works different in terms of you as a delegator, you essentially vote for the stake pools that you want to produce blocks in the network by giving them your delegation, where there isn't that aspect in Bitcoin mining pools. If you were bringing it in there, it would essentially be to KYC on the individual transactions and get them to not process transactions outside of maybe certain regions or something like that. Manny, good to have you on. Not sure who it was that you like saying privacy, but bye bear market. Looking at the chart over here, Bitcoin's looking good, over $24,000 right now. Nice to see that happening. Rules are a good thing if it brings clarity to a project. Yep, rules are a good thing if it does bring clarity. In the case of what's going on with the SEC and staking right now, we're not getting rules really, or not getting clarity. We're getting charges, but we're not being told what the actual process is for people who want to go and adhere by the rules. I don't think they know the rules yet themselves, or the old banking rules need to be looked at to fit the new technology that's here. Feel you could have KYC on the layer 2. Yeah, that's where we talked about earlier. KYC or Midnight. I think Midnight will definitely become more popular if Cardano does bring in things like contingent staking. Not sure what Paddy said, but yeah, just one good point anyway, Paddy.
One tonight, at least one.
One, you get.
that's progress.
We have Pete on as well. Pete, how's it going? Pete has another upcoming fight in March, and we're going to try and get Pete on a Wednesday night then as well after that. Right. I think I've kind of caught up on comments. I'm scrolling down through it here. If you see anything that I've missed, then do pull them up. I kind of lost track there when we were talking. Okay. Proper Daft Punk helmet.
It's the it's the audio. It's the audio. It just muffles the audio too much. I'd have to put a microphone like inside the helmet or something. But I do like the privacy thing though.
Nice. Okay, so I think we are caught up on comments. If I've missed any comments there as I was scrolling through, just ask them again and I'll try and bring them up. Our last point, where are we? Banners. So actually, anything else on that before we move on to the last one?
Nothing for me. I think it's good. It's a long way down the road, I feel. So let's get the discussions going, I guess, instead of shouting matches, and see where it turns out. That's as much as I know.
I think one of the most interesting things is something you guys were discussing, and that's this. We have a couple different things going on, even just within inside Cardano. We've got sort of like the base layer staking going on, but then we also do have something that looks a lot like custodial staking, and this is the kind of staking within the DeFi layers that you guys were talking about, and it's interesting because there's always been this assumption that because those DeFi protocols are often run by DAOs, they would be difficult litigation targets for entities like the CFTC and the SEC. But we've already got case law going on right now, the UkiDAO case, where the CFTC is attacking a DAO. And their strategy has been, okay, figure out how the federal court's going to let us serve the DAO. They figure that out. And then they're like, okay, now we just proceed with the case. The DAO won't respond. The DAO has basically done nothing so far because they figured out, hey, the court's going to let them serve anybody who holds governance tokens. And they know the founders of the project always have governance tokens. So they just serve the founders. And then the founders like, I'm not the DAO, so I'm not going to respond to any of the accusations the CFTC makes. I'm putting words in his mouth. He didn't actually say that, but that's what it looks like. And then the CFTC just proceeds with the case, and they can go all the way to a default judgment against the DAO. Then they get to figure out how to enforce it. But what we have with DAOs are these governance forums where people aren't careful about obscuring their identity. They use the same handle on the governance forum that they use on social media, and then they make mistakes on social media, and it's pretty easy for the CFTC to identify members of the DAO, and then they could just enforce against those members of the DAO if they want to. So they're already building a roadmap for attacking the DAOs that are engaging in anything that they would say wouldn't be legal even if they weren't a DAO. So we think the decentralization is a shield, but they don't seem to agree. Yeah, and you can imagine the scenario. You're the one guy in the States who's in the DAO, so it's really only you who they can go after. You're like, guys, come on, like back me up. Like, nope, nothing to do with me. Like, really interesting. I mean, we have there's so many interesting things. There's so much so many novel issues, like the ISPO thing. I agree with what Paul said. Very hard to distinguish ISPOs from ICOs. We know they're not going to allow ICOs to go forward. We just kind of did the ISPO thing because we were like, it's not an ICO, but it's very unclear how you make the case that that's not just a regular ICO. It's going to be, I think it's going to be interesting. We've got a bunch of novel issues, and I think a lot of people are just hoping the regulators never get around to these novel issues that are popping up in places like Cardano, and they just make examples out of the really big projects, hopefully in other ecosystems.
You know, and there's one I seen recently. They're selling NFTs for part of the revenue that the application is going to make. That's I don't want to give any advice on that, but that is clear as day what that is. You know, that is a minefield waiting to happen. And anybody involved in that sort of stuff, it's super risky. And not giving advice or naming any names, but for me, it's like, do not touch it. And there's been numerous ones in multiple blockchains doing the same type of thing. But once they put a word like revenue in there, security, that's it. They don't even need to think about it, you know, and it is what it is. And, you know, you just can't do it. And it's going to come along and it's just going to come back on them.
Yeah, it's kind of like everybody is driving down the freeway speeding, and the cops are only pulling over like 1 out of every 100 cars, but it's like they're hiring more cops. Like the SEC is manning their enforcement department, and we don't really know how deep they're going to be able to go. Like we just don't know. It's like nobody can really make an argument why they're not violating the law, but everybody's like, but nobody's getting caught, so.
I think sometimes people say it's because it is an NFT, it isn't a share, but it is. You're basically selling shares. Just because it's an NFT doesn't mean it's not a share in the company and you're not registered because you're going to give them revenue. So it's exactly what you're not meant to be doing. And it feels a bit Wild Westy, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's like we're just getting away with a lot of things only because the SEC doesn't have enough people to go after us. If the SEC had 100,000 people, 100,000 attorneys in the enforcement division, all of these projects would have gotten letters from the SEC already. Like every single project you can name is doing something. They've all got fungible tokens, and the fungible tokens may be just earned because you bought something else, or maybe they've got a non-fungible token like you're describing, but it's really a piece of the revenue of the company. I mean, it's like very hard to make the case that, anything less than the vast majority of the projects aren't violating the law and just saying like, no, it's DeFi, we're fine.
Yeah. I never win the lotto, so I don't know. I think if I won it, then they maybe would come after me or something, or would want some tax. Yeah, well, this they are securities too. Everything's a security.
Yeah, and I think it's all fine when a project is small and when it's starting out, but the problem is if they ever do make it as big as most projects talk at the beginning how big they're going to be. If they ever do make it that big, there's always this angle for the SEC or some other body to come back and attack them through that, because if you do that in the beginning, you always leave yourself open. So for me, if I was a founder in a project like that, I personally couldn't go that route, because you're always looking over your shoulder waiting for potentially something to come back. You want your project to be successful, but maybe not so successful that it gets on the level that the SEC are then starting to look at, or whatever other regulating body that it is. Blankets are securities as well.
You make a good point. I think a part of the DeFi playbook right now is get big enough that the founders can make at least tens of millions of dollars, but not big enough that the SEC cares about you. That seems to be like they're trying to hit that Goldilocks zone. How do we make at least $10 million, but stay small enough that the SEC doesn't notice us?
Looks like I opened up the floodgates on the security talk.
Right.
Everything's a security.
Let's go on to the final topic. Anyone who hasn't hit like yet, do appreciate it. Let's see, can we get the stream up in likes for people that are viewing? Do appreciate it. And again, keep throwing in the questions. We'll move on to the last topic. We'll try and finish up in the next 15 minutes or so, make this a decent time compared to, we've been getting longer and longer every week so far. But impact of stable coins, or impact on stable coins of the SEC requesting PAXOS to stop minting BUSD. So the background on this is BUSD is the Binance stablecoin, but it's not issued by Binance. It's issued by PAXOS, who you go to PAXOS, you give them your dollars, and then you get BUSD back from it. So it wasn't actually the SEC, it was the New York, I can't remember the name of the body that told them basically you have to stop minting BUSD, and all you can do is leave it there. They're still going to be redeeming it. CZ came out with a thread to say that they don't agree with it being classed as a security. I don't know how you class a stable coin as a security. If you just go by, I'm told there's lots of other ways to class them, but we'll get into it in a minute. If you do have BUSD, it's a good time to swap it over to another stable coin. From everything we're told, it's fully backed by PAXOS, and they say US dollar denominated reserves. I don't know if that means US dollars sitting there, but it's supposed to be okay. The one good side is that Cardano should pass BUSD in the top 10 fairly soon, because the BUSD market cap is coming down continuously. And with the markets right now, Cardano's on the rise.
How much has it fallen, Paul?
It is.
Is that why markets are green, do you think? Are people leaving the BUSD stable?
It's down 2 billion so far.
It's a decent chunk.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
There's no spare change.
No, it's it will be good to have another stablecoin out of the top 10. I'm not a big fan of having stablecoins in the top 10 for cryptocurrencies. They should have a table of their own, really. But if we look, we'll show here and then we'll get into. So you can see when this came out first, this was at, where is it now? BUSD. So it's 14.3 billion at the minute. It was at 16 when this was announced first. So you see nearly two has been withdrawn so far. That's people going to Paxos with the BUSD and redeeming it back for their dollars. So not much more for Cardano to go to get the pass. Maybe by the end of this stream, we could finish out on that if it happens. But what's your thoughts on SEC stablecoins? Is this the first of many to come?
I don't know. I don't know how they classified it as a security. Was the first thing, because theoretically it is a stablecoin, and it's not in the same bracket as. It's very easy to distinguish. Obviously, they found a way of doing that, and it is a bit worrying to me. Now, okay, we have JED, but JED's well outside jurisdiction and technically doesn't accept US citizens. But other stablecoins, and I'm surprised. For so long, USDT has been questioned, and the big difference between them is minimal. So it is worrying. But for me, I'm like yourself, Paul. I like stablecoins being there. I do think, obviously, in a bear market, they have helped people, and it's where people rush to. But I think it's sort of making, and this is why I think the market is green. It's making people worry, and it's if BUSD is susceptible to being classified as a security, I can nearly talk, then USDT is maybe not too far behind it, but none of that is guaranteed. And I'm just speculating. This is this tinfoil hat stuff. I'm just sort of rambling a bit, but I can't believe they managed to do that. And well, it's a Wells notice. It's not a full-on Kraken style thing yet, but it's it is serious.
Yeah, that's one of the most interesting things here is that none of the correspondence has really been made public. Like Paxos has acknowledged that they got a Wells notice, but they haven't published everything yet. For some reason, we haven't been able to see what exactly the SEC is saying. The interesting part is what we don't talk about in crypto. And we talk about the Howey test all the time in crypto, but the Howey test is just a subset of a subset. So the Howey test just describes what that court thought investment contracts were, but investment contracts are part of this laundry list of like 40 things in Section 2A1 of the 1933 Securities Act. Mm-hmm. And there are like another 30 things in that paragraph that they describe. And it's virtually any type of economic instrument you could name, is going to be on that list. The Howey test just applies to the investment contracts part. And it has this expectation of profits thing that we talk about a lot in crypto, but that's just for investment contracts. The rest of the list just straight up names something like a note, and they just say pretty much that's included in this title, the Securities Act. So it's like he's got a lot of tools. Gensler's got a lot of tools to say that stable coins, especially asset-backed custodial stable coins, are securities.
Tell me this: what exactly is a Wells notice? Being someone not from
it's just the regulator telling you that they've completed an investigation and they think you violated, some statute or reg or something, and they're giving you a chance to respond as the project and convince them not to litigate against you, because their actions aren't criminal, they're civil. So they're basically suing you. They're suing you and trying to get the court to let them fine you and order you not to do things. Like in the case of Kraken didn't want to go through a Ripple type thing, a Ripple type war. So they just took the 30 million and agreed not to have a staking program. But it's basically just a notice. Hey, we've been investigating you for a long time. We've decided the following. Convince us otherwise or we sue you. Okay, so it's not a full-blown cease and desist. You have to stop right now. It's you're in the scope at the minute, and we're coming. Okay. Yeah, it's like there's like two choices. The project can either decide to fight it, convince the SEC otherwise, and then the SEC can also decide, like, okay, based on what they said, maybe we won't go after them. Maybe we think they're right, we won't go after them, that kind of thing. But predictably, they've kind of made their minds up before they ever get to that stage.
Okay. Yeah, but you can see people are leaving it under the pretense that it might get shut down.
Yeah, I mean, it was really obvious last year. Like the current administration of the White House was holding these working group meetings that involved Yellen in Treasury, Gary Gensler, the CFTC, and everybody else they could muster who might have a stake in the anti-crypto war. And they laid all these plans out. I mean, it was really obvious from the meetings. They laid all these plans out last year because you'd see them in public appearances talking about the things they were obviously talking about in the meetings. It was super obvious what they were going to do this year. And to me, it was obvious they would do it after the midterm elections, which meant the holidays followed that, which meant it had to be 2023. So I think they've been planning this out, all of last year.
Yeah, an interesting theory. I've seen this one going around as well. And maybe it's CZ has got the attention of regulators with everything that went on with FTX as well. So Cryptos or Us put a theory together. CZ sold USDC. So the parents of USDC ratted out BUSD to clear competition for benefit of BlackRock or something else. And last year, some stage, late on last year, on Binance, they started converting your USDC into BUSD, that they were going to essentially on the platform replace USDC with BUSD. So it definitely does have some legs, this theory, on that potentially there is something there. I know Circle came out, there was rumors going around that USDC had also got a notice, and there was rumors going around about that. But Circle have come out themselves, who are the issuers of USDC. They've come out and said that they got no notices at all. And I was just looking there. This is the market cap of BUSD. So this is how much is in circulation. So you can see this is the last 7 days. So you can see it was steady up here at 16 billion. And then over the last few days, it's just dropping now as people are getting out of it. If you look at USDC the last 7 days, it started to gain a little bit the last few days. So some of the people getting out of BUSD now, if the markets are turning, then people might be coming in from other sides as well. But if you look at Tether, it's definitely been going up the last month anyway. And then the last kind of few days, it's got a big spike of people going back to Tether. And maybe the reason they're not going back to USDC as quick is just because of some of the rumors that are there that maybe they're next. So I think it will push towards decentralized stablecoins as well going forward. If this is going to be good for ZHED or not, we'll have to wait and see, or other options that are out there. I talked to Shahaf yesterday. That video is going to come out tomorrow, and I asked him about it. Was he worried about this type of thing? And they said they don't have any worries on this due to the decentralized nature of ZHED and how it's backed, that there's no one entity holding the fiat. He was talking about where endpoints where you have your fiat gateways, that's where generally the risk, where they're going to attack first. There's no saying that they won't attack things like that. We have USDA from Anzens and Emergo coming out. That's one, again, it's one I'm looking forward to seeing because of the transparency they've talked about, how much they're going to show what's in the bank account versus what's in circulation. So it'll be interesting to see if something like this slows them down or how that one works out as well.
I'm really interested. I'm trying to remember the details. Can you guys remember who the banking partner of Anzens was on USDA? Was it Signature?
I can't remember offhand now.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of stuff circulating on social media right now about how Signature is basically cutting back on its relationship with crypto just generally. And you only had a few choices earlier. I mean, the banks who would basically do business with crypto included like Signature and Silvergate. So it's like if all this Operation Choke Point 2.0 stuff is leading the bank regulators to sort of informally tell all the banks, we don't want you doing any business with crypto, it's going to make it difficult. I mean, not just from a regulatory basis to do the asset-backed stablecoin thing, but you might not even be able to get the bank relationship to make it happen.
Yeah, there's I'd be interested to see. I must reach out and see, can I get them to come on the channel to have a talk about where they are, or talk about things like this, even not specifically for them. They should have a good head in the game in terms of stablecoins and where things are at right now. So there'll be an interesting conversation. I don't really know much about it at the minute, about how the last few weeks have changed it, or even the US banking. It's not something I'm that familiar with. Comment here that definitely makes sense as well is that BlackRock being linked with USDC as well, and whether the SEC will go against them, or if there was any risk there, you would expect BlackRock to exit before we hear about anything bigger, before it trickles down to us, that we'd see some movement there first. Can Jed exist without Cody? I asked Shahaf this yesterday as well about the front end. Could someone else build a front end? And he said they are going to open source it fairly soon. Didn't get a date on it, but the contracts will be open source, and anyone else can build a front end on it then. So essentially you could work without Cody. All of I asked about the fees and different things like that. He said they're all hard coded in. So if someone else builds a front end, it would just be another way to interact with it. So someone else could build a front end and not exclude the US, because if someone in the US has the knowledge, they can build the transactions themselves and interact with the smart contract. It's only the JED website that they can't actually access. But anything else, guys, before we wrap it up? Any other thoughts on stablecoins or anything else we've went over tonight, or any other comments there? Let us know now as well.
It's a lot of drama, isn't it? It's been a very dramatic week in terms of crypto. You know, and I'm actually surprised for things to be green considering everything that's going on. But that's probably the reason why it is green, because people are actually in stablecoins. Who knows? That's my speculation. The other side of it is, you know, we see drama in crypto all the time. It always passes. I don't get too hung up on most of these types of things. And I try and just blow it off like, it'll be fine again. In another couple of weeks, next week there will be a different drama that we're going to be talking about, Paul. I just know it. It'll be something else that's everybody's going crazy about. That's about it.
Yeah, I'm really interested in kind of this timing issue. I'm pretty skeptical. I really do think we're in for a sprint of regulatory stuff like this that causes this kind of drama, right up until the point they think it's too close to the next White House election. Because I think they don't want to taint that election with this perception that they're very anti something that young voters might approve of, like crypto. So I think we're into this like intense sprint, and then all of a sudden it lets up and nobody will know why. And it's just because that was the plan all along. They were going to get through this stuff, regulate it as hard as possible, and then stop so that it was like old news by the time the next election cycle comes around.
Yeah, and they have to be seen to be cracking down on it as well, when everything over the last, I suppose, 12 months now at this point, going back as far as Luna and everything that happened there, when it's hitting mainstream media and news items, they need to be seen to do something against it to satisfy them voters that are sitting outside of crypto. But then you also want to bring back in the crypto voters as well.
Oh, they ticked the box this week. We did something. Look, it's all good. No problem.
Yeah, and I hadn't actually thought of the stable coins, and maybe that's behind the pump, and it could be a good shout on why we're seeing so much green now and some people getting out of them. It's good to see that USDT market cap is going up as well, which means there's more of that coming into circulation, that it's not just people getting, if all of the main stable coins, the market cap was going down and the markets were going up, I'd be more wary of it. But some of the green could be to do with that. I know back, I don't know, was it 2018 or one of the years, they nearly all roll in together at this stage, when there was a lot of fear around Tether that it was going to collapse, and people just started panicking, getting out of it, and Bitcoin shot up. It had some of its biggest, I can't even remember what year it was now at this point, but I remember there was one day was just massive green, and they shouldn't have been. It was just pure panic of people getting out of stable coins and into it. And I wouldn't say no if it happened tomorrow or the next day, but
just going to say, Paul, does that mean I've done 2 good points tonight?
I'll give you that. I'll give it. I don't know what the first one was, so I'll give you one, and you got one from the comments there as well. Matthew says, what's wrong with Cody? Maybe I'm not sure if I said something that you picked up as being wrong. I wasn't meaning there was something wrong with Cody. I was just meaning that you could build another front end on it as well, that someone else can build another, or maybe that was back to Manny's comment I see there. Can it exist without Cody? But anyone else can build a front end once the contracts are opened. But because everything's hard coded into it, Cody are still going to get their fee out of it because they're processing part of it as well. But when them contracts come out, who's to say we don't get another version of it? Someone else builds another Jed or something else out there as well. Thanks, guys. Great. Cardano successfully completing another FU this week.
FU, I could interpret FU as something else.
That's what and anyone who wasn't here from the beginning, FU is something different than you're thinking.
The functional upgrade.
Will the SEC case have an impact on the wider crypto market? It definitely will, in my opinion, is that it's massive. Depending on what way it goes, I don't hold XRP. I don't plan to hold it at any point right now. Maybe it changes in the future, but I still want to see them win, not because it's going to help the token, but because of overall crypto. Because if the SEC defeats Ripple, Ripple is in the case, I think, not XRP, isn't it? So if they defeat them and the SEC comes out the winner, then that sets a precedent that they can then go after any other crypto that's out there. Because of the huge fight that Ripple put up, if they then lost, it's not good for overall crypto. So I think it definitely will have a big impact.
For the absolute entertainment factor, I hope Ripple and XRP win. That's just my go-to.
The cricket price gone up so high in the last number of hours. I presume that's the overall crypto markets. Haven't seen what the major spike was. Started off yesterday with the numbers that came out. They weren't really good, but they weren't really bad either. The numbers that came out yesterday mean that we're still going to get new rate hikes over the next month or two. I would say there's not much chance of stopping that when you see the inflation numbers were slightly higher than expected. But I'm not sure what their real kickoff was today yet. I've kind of been in and out today. Either of you see any sparks today?
One of those days. Who knows?
The reason why I asked is because all you have to do is wreck Cody is just, I presume wreck Jed is just attack Cody. And yeah, they are 1 point in it. I know they're very big on the regulation side as well. So we'll see where it goes. But I appreciate everyone coming in. Any final thoughts, guys, from ye? I think I'm through the comments now.
No, that's it from me, Paul. Thanks very much, Army of Spies, for joining us, man. It's a pleasure.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, look, it's great to have you on. I appreciate you taking the time again. And an hour and a half. I don't know if this is our shortest one yet. It's not really short or anything, but we're going to try and nail them in to aim for an hour and hard cut off at an hour and a half anymore going forward. So we're just there today. And look, we'll definitely have you back multiple weeks again. If you're up for it, you're more than welcome anytime to get your opinions on it.
Sounds good. Will do.
All right. Thanks everyone for watching. If you're new, do subscribe. If you've stuck with us from the beginning to now, really do appreciate it. Hopefully everyone enjoyed the conversation, got some value from it, maybe a few laughs along the way as well. And we might have even come up with a few new terms for the Cardano hard fork for the next hard fork event. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll talk to you soon.